What's up, everybody? Welcome to the video. We're going by core plays for week 21 of the NFL season on DraftKings and FanDuel Playoff Edition, round 3. Two great games this weekend as the Baltimore Ravens take on the Kansas City Chiefs, with the Detroit Lions on the road taking on the San Francisco 49ers. Looking forward to a great week. This is our last classic slate of the season, so only two games here. Not much to break down, but we'll go over either way. But if you do enjoy, make sure you have a like down below. Subscribe to the channel if you're brand new, and let's dive right into it. And as always, if you like what you see on the screen behind me, it's always available completely free for a week over my Patreon with our free week trials. But we do have NASCAR coming up very soon. February 4th, we have the Busch Clash. That'll be after this weekend when there's no football on, unless you want to count the Pro Bowl. Then we have the Super Bowl, and then we have the Daytona $500 million to first for their contest. The first time they ran that out a couple years ago, with the million winner from my Discord. So NASCAR is the main thing on this channel, so I do think you guys will enjoy the content over there. It's a very niche sport, but I break it down very in depth. So if you like my NFL stuff, you'll definitely like the NASCAR stuff, even if you have no idea about what goes on with cars racing around in a circle turning left. Let's get into it here. Let's start with the quarterbacks. Very small slate, only two games, so it's going to be 4 options at QB. So we're just going to break down each one here. And we're just going to do this game by game here, which is nice that they're actually in that order, pricing wise anyway. The first game, elite quarterbacks facing off. The second game, not really so much. Really good game managers, I guess, that can make big plays. I'm not calling them strictly game managers, but I think you know what I mean. Lamar Jackson, Patrick Mahomes are definitely a different type of quarterback compared to Brock Purdy and Jared Goff. We have Lamar Jackson, the Ravens, facing off versus Mahomes and the Chiefs. 24-point implied team total for Baltimore here at home versus KC's very solid defense. Baltimore also has a really good defense. 44.5-point over-under and a 3.5-point spread, or 4-point spread, depending on which book you are looking at. Lamar Jackson's fresh off a monster game versus the Houston Texans. 100 yards on the ground, multiple rushing touchdowns. A fantastic day for fantasy purposes. And while I'm not expecting quite the performance versus the Chiefs, he still should be fine here. And if you are looking for a cash game quarterback and you don't want to spend down, I get going with Lamar. I mean, he offers you rushing upside that no other quarterback on the slate is going to offer you. It's just the defensive matchup here isn't exactly great. The Chiefs are allowing the 5th fewest points per game in the position, and the Ravens are allowing the 3rd fewest points per game to the position. So while these are elite level quarterbacks, and they're probably going to be underowned in tournaments, so I don't mind being overweight a little bit. For me, I like Brock Purdy a ton at that price point. We'll get into that when we talk about the matchup, but I'm fine with either of these quarterbacks in tournaments. Lamar Jackson, if I had to pick, he'd be the cash game option of the two, but again, you are spending up for that nearly $8,000, but I think pricing overall is very affordable this week. But CMC does seem like someone you're pretty much going to want to try to lock in because running back is so weak. So if you are playing cash games, that's something to consider. You can't quite get up to a guy like Lamar Jackson if you're trying to fit in CMC as well. And the stacking options are very clear. I would say if you're playing Lamar, you're playing Zay Flowers, you're playing either one of the tight ends, either Mark Andrews or Isaiah Likely. You also have a couple of secondary options, but I think we know who the main threats are. And for Mahomes, if Travis Kelce doesn't have a big game, you can pretty much probably wipe away Patrick Mahomes, so they're pretty much married together. And then after that, Rashee Rice is the other one that you could look to double stack with, because the other options after that, they're all either hurt or they're guys like Justin Watson, Noah Gray, and you just really can't trust that type of production. And then we have the two cheaper quarterbacks, Brock Purdy and Jared Goff. I will say Jared Goff on the road is a completely different animal, not in a good way. His numbers are way down in the home road splits, especially when you're outside in the elements. Not that it's really going to be bad weather in San Francisco or anything, but when he's not under a dome, it just tends to drop off, especially when they're away from Ford Field in Detroit. Brock Purdy, on the other hand, I like him a lot here. 29.5 implied team total, which is the highest of the week, 7.5-point spread in the Niners' favor. And this game does feature a 51.5-point over-under. His numbers on the season, very good. I'm not saying he's the best quarterback in the world, but I do think he happens to be underpriced almost each and every single week. I played Brock Purdy quite a bit so far this season, and it's worked out quite often, so I'm not going to complain. 270 on average for him. They don't really throw the ball a ton, 9.6 yards per attempt. This can be a very efficient offense. The big question mark is Deebo Samuel. I'm assuming he's going to play, maybe in a limited capacity. I can't imagine he's going to be at full health. But when he's on and off the field, this 49ers offense definitely is quite different. So let's root for him to be on the field, even if he's not, like I said, at full health. Just him being on there is going to help him out. I'm sure you can get specific plays drawn up just for him because we know he is a big play maker. But the thing I like about the most here about the 49ers offense and Brock Purdy is that the lines are terrible versus the pass. They're actually very good versus the run. Not saying I'm not going to be playing CMC or anything, but allowing the 3rd most points in the quarterback position at 21.9, 270 yards and over 1.5 passing touchdowns. And if you're looking at the first 2 weeks of the playoffs, Matthew Stafford over 300 yards and multiple touchdowns, shredded them through the air. And then last week, Baker Mayfield, even though they lost 350 yards, multiple touchdowns, ended up 2 picks. One was at the very end when they're trying to push it down the field, and then the other one was a tip ball towards Mike Evans. So we have both quarterbacks so far over 300 yards. Not really sure Brock Purdy's going to get you 300 plus, but I do think he can get you 250 and 2 at the very least. So at that price point, I would take it all day. And the stacking options are quite easy. Brandon Ayuk would be my number one option this week with the question mark around Deebo Samuel. If Deebo Samuel happens to play, he's a bit of a risky play, but you could look his way in tournaments. Then you have George Kittle and CMC as well. Jared Goff, not the hugest fan here. Like I said, he is worse on the road, especially when he's outside. And if we're looking at it, the 49ers are allowing the 7th fewest points per game to quarterbacks this year. In tournaments, he will be underowned. So if you want to go that route, I get it. But for me, Brock Purdy is going to be the guy I am rolling with in most lineups. Moving over to our build, like I always say, do not copy and paste this. We are simply just following the rules that I typically use to build single entry / 3 max type builds where I'm going to pick a quarterback. I want a couple of pass catchers with them. Usually try to find a run back option. It's not something you absolutely have to do, but I don't mind the correlation with it. With this being a super small slate, sometimes we can bend the rules a little bit. We could triple stack. We could quadruple stack in some cases. That's saying, again, you don't have to, but don't copy paste the guys. Just simply just grabbing players that we talk about. So let's just roll with Purdy here. Then we'll move on to running back. We don't exactly have too many options. We usually do have a short list if it's an 11-game slate. So now that we're 2 games, we're kind of just taking with what we get. But we do have a solid group of backs here. Christian McCaffrey, Isaiah Pacheco, Jahmyr Gibbs. David Montgomery's not on here, but you could add him on. Then you also have Justice Hill here, who's only $4,800. Not like what I saw last week with 13 carries. Gus Edwards did leave the game later on, I believe, in the 4th quarter, so they grinded out the end with Justice Hill. And we also saw some Dalvin Cook involved, but Hill does get involved in the passing game, so at $4,800, I don't mind that if you're looking for a pump play. CMC, if you are playing cash games, you kind of just have to jam him in. I know the matchup is terrible. Detroit is awful versus the pass, but very good versus the run. I don't believe they've allowed a individual running back this season to get over 70 rushing yards versus them. Now in the season, they're allowing the fewest points per game at 15.7, only 60 rushing yards, and half a rushing touchdown. Not much of the air either. But I would tell you one thing, CMC is a guy they have not faced yet. So while those numbers are great, he's a different animal. This 49ers offense and offensive line's a different animal, so I don't really think we should have any concerns about CMC. He's projected so much better than every other running back where, okay, matchup is what it is. He's still going to get you 20-plus opportunities, and he's more than likely going to score. I believe last I looked, his odds to score were over -300, so good chance for getting those points. But Isaiah Pacheco is the RB1 in that Chiefs offense. He's going to get you 15-plus touches. He's going to be involved in the passing game a little bit, and there's always a chance he scores, so I'm fine with him. He's not really like a sexy play, but he's going to get the volume in a good offense. And then we have Jahmyr Gibbs at $6,400, and you're pretty much getting Alvin Kamara at a discount. I know he doesn't get quite the volume, but man, he looks so good out there, especially when he's in open field. They use him in the passing game, and I mean, he had a great game versus Tampa Bay. Heard out some nice chunk plays, and while David Montgomery is always a threat to steal touchdowns around the goal line, Jahmyr Gibbs can make up for that with receptions and just electric plays overall, over 5 yards per carry this season. I expect them to be trailing in this one, so if that's going to be the case, probably more of a Jahmyr Gibbs game script than it would be for David Montgomery. And while he's not touchdown reliant by any means, it would be nice just for a ceiling game. And then Justice Hill I already mentioned, but he's just really cheap, and if he can get us double-digit opportunities, that's all I'm asking for in a super small slate. Moving over to our build here, even though I have Brock Purdy, he never really loves stacking the running back with the quarterback. But since he's involved in the passing game, I mean, it's totally fine. Like, if looking at last week, he had 12 targets in that game. So, I mean, the correlation is still there. And then since I'm spending up for CMC and some of the pass catching options with Brock Purdy aren't exactly free, I am going to play Justice Hill here to open up some salary at $4,800, and we'll move on to receiver. And to keep this as simple as possible, as always, it all comes down to my stacks. I could love Rashee Rice, I could love Zay Flowers, but since I have Brock Purdy, I can't start with those guys. I have to make sure I get my stacking pieces in, then we build around that. We don't build around the one-offs and then try to fit the stack, and it's going to be the complete opposite. So I am looking at guys like Deebo Samuel if he happened to play and you feel comfortable with that. But Brandon Ayuk would be a number one option here at $1,600. I think he's too cheap. Should be able to eat up that Detroit secondary. Jennings, if Deebo happens to be out, I think he's a little bit cheap there at $4,600. Run back options, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Josh Reynolds, Jameis Williams, Khalif Raymond has been ruled out. So those guys are going to get the bump that they have been getting since he has been out. And if you're playing cash games, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Brandon Ayuk, and I would say any of the cheap Lions wide receivers, those are probably the best places to go for cash games. Rashee Rice is fine because you know he's going to get the targets in that Chiefs offense. There's really no other receiver that's going to compete with him. And then I really don't think the Ravens receiver make a ton of sense in cash games. Zay Flowers would be the only one. Maybe Bateman if you need a complete pump, but I would feel more comfortable with the Lions there, as both teams in that Lions and 49ers game have good matchups because both defenses do struggle versus the pass quite heavily, but more so on the Lions side than the 49ers. And receivers absolutely eat them up, and Mike Evans destroyed them last week, and then Puka Nacua nearly 200 yards touchdown. So again, just comes down to your stacks. Like if I'm playing Lamar Jackson, I'm going straight to Zay Flowers. I'm looking at Odell, Rashad Bateman. If I have Mahomes, I think you guys get the idea. All right, so back to our build. I'm going to plug in Brandon Ayuk number 1 here. I just think he's too cheap at $6,900, and I'm just assuming Debo is going to be a bit limited. As of right now, I'm not sure. It's only a Friday, so we'll have to see on Sunday if we get some better news. He has returned to practice the previous 2 days, so I do think he's trending towards playing. I'm just not exactly sure how it's going to be on the field. And then I'm probably going to be looking at George Kittle as my second stacking option with Brock Purdy, or maybe third if you want to count CMC. So I'm going to bypass anybody else here. We're just going to plug in some cheap Detroit receivers to get those run back options. So I think Reynolds would be the number 1 option for me. Jameson Williams I do like as well if you're looking for the home run play. We'll see if we need him later, but let's move on to tight end and defense. In tight ends, a lot of the things I said about wide receiver apply here. We're just really trying to add them on stacks here. So if you have Jared Goff, play Laporta. You have Lamar Jackson. You're poisoned between Mark Andrews and Isaiah Likely. It looks like Andrews is going to be back this week, so definitely muddies the waters a bit. It feels like Isaiah Likely is always guaranteed to get you 2 catches, but one of them happens to be a touchdown, so you're happy at the end of the day. Andrews obviously going to make that a bit tougher. We know he's super talented, but first week back from a pretty major injury, I would say. Travis Kelce, for playing Mahomes, he's obviously fine as a one-off. You can afford him, but I'm probably only going to go to him in Mahomes stacks, or maybe he's a run back option if I'm just stacking that game up and I have Lamar. George Kittle makes the most sense for my build. I think he's too cheap here at $5,300, and again, I just think everybody can eat in the secondary, so I like that price a bit. And if you are feeling frisky, we have Noah Gray down there. And maybe Patrick Mahomes gets confused, thinks he's Travis Kelce for a play, and we get a lucky touchdown. That might be the way that works out. And then for defense, I really could care less who you play here, because if you're telling me you have a great read on the defenses on this slate, obviously the 49ers are going to be the play, but it's just a matter of being able to afford them. So if you have the money for the 49ers, play them. If not, I don't care. Roll some dice. Hope they get 5 points and you'll be happy. All right, so let's finish this build off. We have 4 spots left, nearly $5,000. So I really don't think it's going to be hard to do whatever we want here. Since I have Purdy, we are plugging in George Kittle. And I would kind of like this game to be a bit of a shootout. So I'm not really sure if I'm in love with playing the Niners defense or the Ravens here at $3,200 just to get a little bit different. Like, I mean, I don't really think it matters either way. But let's just plug the Ravens in. We have Justice Hill. Or, I don't know, whatever. It's just the defense. Pick whichever one you want. $5,200 left for the last 2 spots. So I feel like we could pretty much do whatever we want. I don't think we'd be able to fit in St. Brown unless you played Noah Gray. That's one way to do it, but I don't really feel comfortable doing that. If you want to go with another Lions receiver, you could. We'd have $6,700 left, and we're looking at a guy like Travis Kelce, Isaiah Pacheco, G. Rice, Jahmyr Gibbs, Dave Flowers. You could basically do whatever you want if you happen to go the Williams route. If you wanted to go a little bit more balanced and play a like Dave Flowers, it's not going to give you too much more money, but it gives you $4,600, and you can look at guys like Jennings, Odell, Likely. So I'm going to leave this blank because I really don't know what I want to do. You guys can use your imagination, but I think this overall roster construction does look pretty good. So we have Brock Purdy stacked up with Brandon Ayuk, George Kittle, kind of CMC. You don't usually think of that as the complete correlation stack, but he did have 12 targets last week. So, I mean, it's certainly there. Yeah, Justice Hill because he's cheap. That's another thing we could switch around if we wanted. We have Josh Reynolds as the run back option, Ravens defense, and really those 2 spots are open. If we took out Justice Hill and we upgraded a little bit at running, say we wanted to play Jahmyr Gibbs just to get a full-on stack in this. If Gibbs, and I do like the game script for him because they are trailing. He should be getting up off, so we know how good he is in the field. And then we'd have $4,400 left, and even then we can really just kind of do whatever we want. If we wanted to play Rashad Bateman because we lost our Baltimore exposure, that gives us $200 left. You could look at Mark Andrews. We still have Justice Hill there if we wanted to go back to him. So it's pretty wide open with whatever you want to do. But there's many ways to go. Just make sure it makes the most sense and you correlate your lineups to give yourself a shot at the top of tournament. And like always, just running the optimizer here at the end to see who is populating the most. As of right now, see who will probably be popular or what the projections like. So let's pull up the builds here. It is Friday, so obviously a lot can change by now. As you can see, it's 5:18 p.m. So we're going to look up at the usage here, see what players are getting jammed in the most. Now, these are not the exact projections. I did add some randomness on there, and obviously ownership can change quite a bit by the time Sunday rolls around. But, and some slight stack settings as well. So not like pure optimals or anything like that. But no surprise here. Heavy dosage of 49ers up top. Brock Purdy, Christian McCaffrey, and George Kittle. We also have some of the Lions as run back options, which makes a ton of sense as well. So Sam Laporta, Josh Reynolds, Amon St. Brown, Brandon Ayuk. So pretty much like the first 7 position players, or just players, I guess, in general, are all from that 49ers and Detroit game, which makes sense. It's the higher scoring games. Obviously, projections will like that just a little bit more. Ravens defense coming up quite a bit as well. And so I really don't think that's surprising by any means. You can see Detroit, San Francisco getting jammed in a ton. Then Baltimore, KC lagging just a little bit behind, which I think is what we're going to see in the ownership as well. I do think most people do stack up this late game as the defense, especially on the Lions side, is going to be a bit softer overall. And I do want to mention really quick, as soon as I got done recording, just got an alert. Deebo Samuel is off the injury report. So assuming he is good to go, like it sounds like, I feel like you can play him in DFS. I mean, there's not much more opportunities this season, so he can rest in the offseason. So you can definitely fire up Deebo Samuel if you want, and that would probably up my projections a little bit. So he obviously wasn't populating a ton there, but I think once that gets corrected, he will show up a little bit. But with that being said, that's all I got for you guys this week. So I hope you did enjoy. If you did, make sure you like down below. Subscribe to the channel if you are brand new. I'll be back around the Super Bowl to do the showdown video, but after that, it's all full on NASCAR. I cannot wait. I wish you all the best of luck, and I'll see you all